On August the 11th, 2012, Nicola Franklin stabbed and took the life of her fiancé, Billy Brewster. Franklin met Brewster in 2009 in California. In June 2010, they moved to Pennsylvania. She and Brewster got engaged in December 2011 and planned to be married on the day of Brewster's death. Franklin and Brewster lived with 4 minor children: Brewster's son, Franklin's 11-year-old son, Franklin's 15-year-old niece, and Franklin and Brewster's 9-month-old son. And for the purposes of this video, I'll refer to them as child and son because their names will be redacted. During the trial, Franklin testified that they only had one car, so that she drove Brewster to work at 6 p.m. and picked him up at 6 a.m. On August 10th, 2012, she had been shopping for a dress for one of the kids. She had her makeup appointment, she had other appointments, and then she went to run some errands. The day before the wedding, August 10th, 2012, Brewster's cousin, Nicola Carly, and his wife, Monique Carly, arrived from out of town and were staying with Franklin and Brewster. At approximately 9 p.m., Nicola, Monique, and Brewster went to a strip club. After a few hours, they left the club and went to a restaurant. Because Nicola had a headache, they returned to the apartment without ordering food. Nicola testified that Brewster had 2 drinks and a beer while they were out. He stated that when they returned to the apartment, Brewster asked whether Franklin and the kids wanted to get something to eat. After that, it was back and forth like bickering. Franklin and Brewster went to their bedroom, and Brewster shut the door and said, "We have company," in the sense that we shouldn't be arguing, don't raise your voice, we have guests. Nicola stated that he was in his bedroom and that he could hear the back and forth between Franklin and Brewster but did not hear what was being said. He then heard broken glass and he heard furniture being tussled. Nicola testified that he came out of the bedroom after hearing Franklin yell. He said, "Anthony, give me the knife." When he came out, Brewster's back was to the front door and Franklin was 7 or 8 feet in front of Brewster holding a knife. Nicola told Franklin, "Don't do this, stop what you're doing right now, put the knife down." Franklin told him to get away or she would stab him. Nicola saw Brewster's son and Franklin's niece who was holding the other kid. Nicola stated that Brewster did not have anything in his hands and that Franklin was yelling that she was going to kill Brewster. Nicola stated that he screamed at Brewster to get out and started walking toward Brewster. As Nicola reached for the door, Franklin lunged at Brewster and started inserting the knife into him. Nicola said that Brewster's hands were up when Franklin was inserting the knife into him, and that Brewster said to Franklin, "Is this what you really want to do?" Nicola grabbed Brewster, opened the door, and walked him outside. When Nicola re-entered the apartment, he saw that Monique had Franklin restrained on the floor. Now, upon cross-examination, Nicola reiterated that he could hear voices, but could not hear what Franklin or Brewster were saying until he heard Franklin ask for a knife. He stated that he never saw one of the kids in Brewster's hands, but did see the others walking away from Brewster. Monique testified that when they returned from the club, she and Nicola went to their bedroom. She stated that Franklin was upset because she felt that she and Brewster needed to watch how they spent money. Franklin and Brewster then went into their bedroom and Monique did not hear any activity after they closed the door. She then heard Franklin say, "Get me the knife," and told Nicola to check on them. Monique got dressed and exited their room. She saw Brewster with his back to the wall. She also saw Franklin, Nicola, and the kids. Monique stated that Nicola told Franklin, "Please don't do this," and Franklin said, "Stop before I put this knife in you." In addition, after one of the kids said, "Please don't do this," Franklin said, "Stop." She stated that when Nicola turned to open the door, Franklin lunged at Brewster and put the knife in him. Monique then wrapped her arms around Franklin and tackled her to the ground. She stated that Brewster did not have anything in his hands and at the time of the stabbing that his hands were in the air and that he said, "Is this what you want to do?" So both guests, their stories corroborated. Franklin also testified. She stated that when she returned to the apartment after running the errands, Brewster was upset because she had spent money and said he was going out. While Brewster, Nicola, and Monique were at the club, Franklin gave off the kids a bath and played with him. She and the children cleaned, prepared the food for the wedding, decorated and moved furniture. It seems the wedding was gonna take place a few hours later in the early morning. Franklin testified that Brewster was drunk when he came home, that they had an argument about where to get food. After Brewster started yelling and called her a stupid whore, they went to their bedroom. In the bedroom, Brewster grabbed Franklin's face and pushed her to the ground. She then called the police. And as this story goes on, the question remains, this was not an isolated incident. It's clear this is a culmination of events that just exploded, the result of which I'm going to explain as we go on. Brewster started swinging at her, but he was so drunk that it was kind of like he was moving in slow motion, and she was dodging at the same time. Brewster tackled Franklin to the bed, and she started scratching at his face. She went to call the police again, but realized the prior call was still on, so began to talk loudly, and this is key, because they managed to hear her when she was talking to Brewster, not knowing she was on the phone. Franklin stated that Brewster tried to stomp her, but could not because he was so drunk, and that he threw a jumperoo at her, which hit her arm and head. She stated that Brewster then picked up the youngest kid and was going in his back pocket. She guessed he was going in for keys or a pocket knife that he kept on him. Brewster headed toward the front door with the kid, and Franklin got a knife. As Brewster was in the front of the door, one of the kids took the youngest from Brewster. Franklin then states that Brewster came toward her and she swung the knife at him. She stated that the kids were behind her and she kind of stood in the way so that he wouldn't go after them. Brewster then came at her twice. He tried to get the knife from her and she kept lunging the knife at him. She wanted to scare him and had not realized that she had cut him. Franklin testified that then everybody just came out at the same time and she started hearing everybody and there was a whole bunch of commotion. On cross-examination, Franklin said the jumperoo was really heavy and it was laying on top of me, and then when I got up it was just on the floor. Franklin did not remember Brewster putting his hands up. She said she lunged at Brewster before everyone was out and that after everybody came out she started swinging the knife. Franklin also presented two character witnesses who testified Franklin had an excellent reputation in the community for being peaceable, non-violent and law-abiding. Well, according to this story, I would think not. On cross-examination, both agreed that stabbing someone with a knife was not peaceful. Shortly after 2 a.m., they called 911 to request help. On the 911 tape, Brewster can be heard arguing with one another. Franklin yells to one of her sons, "Get me a knife," to which Brewster said, "Give me my baby." She is heard telling Brewster he is fucking drunk. She also admonishes Brewster to put my baby down, give my fucking baby, and threaten him by yelling, "You know I'll swing at your dumb ass." But what she didn't know, all of this is being recorded on the 911 call she initially made. She didn't realize she did not hung up. She's also heard saying to Brewster, "Die, bitch," to which she also threatened to stab Nakia. This proved to be fateful in her outcome. It was also heard on the tape that Franklin said to Brewster, "Fucking die tonight. You wanna die tonight?" She requested an ambulance because she cut him for trying to take the baby, so the version of events she gave, well, she missed a few details. Eventually, Whitehall Township Police Officer Matthew Rezek testified that when he arrived, Brewster appeared unconscious and was bleeding from a wound on the left side of his body. He contacted the communication center and told the dispatcher to have the responding ambulance expedited. Once other officers arrived on scene, Officer Rezek proceeded inside the apartment. After Rezek encountered Nakia, Monique, Franklin and several minor children, Franklin was visibly upset, was seated on the couch with Monique. The officer asked about the location of the knife. Franklin indicated she hid it in the kitchen and took Officer Rezek to the location where she had hidden it. Detectives Richard Heffelfinger and Michael Marks testified that they did not notice anything unusual about the apartment, other than the kitchen cabinet was open and the utensil tray was on the floor. The wedding napkins had blood all over them, but Detective Heffelfinger saw no signs of a struggle. Detective Marks stated that the jumperoo was in the middle of the open area of the master bedroom just in front of the bed, and responded no when asked if it appeared damaged. An autopsy showed Brewster died of a stab wound to the heart. The manner of death was homicide. Dr. Isidore Michalakis, who performed the autopsy, testified that Brewster had wounds that were indicative of a struggle or hand-to-hand combat. The same doctors also testified that Brewster had a 0.13% blood alcohol level at the time of his death. The jury was asked to determine whether Franklin was guilty of criminal homicide, and if so, whether she was guilty of first-degree murder, third-degree murder, voluntary manslaughter, or involuntary manslaughter. Eventually, the jury found Franklin guilty of first-degree murder, but Franklin went into detail about the relationship history, so let me get onto that now. Franklin testified that Brewster physically and mentally abused her starting in late 2009. The first instance of physical abuse occurred outside of their apartment in Whitehall, Pennsylvania. Brewster did not like something Franklin said, so he grabbed her and shoved her against the car. Franklin stated that Brewster was a jealous man and would subject her to mental or physical abuse because he believed she was looking at other men. He would choke her, hit her in the back of the head, and throw her against walls. She stated the physical abuse occurred in the apartment and in the car. She testified as to one instance where, because Brewster thought she was looking at another guy, he grabbed the wheel of the car and hit the guardrail of the highway, knocking the side mirror off the car. She stated that when Brewster learned she was pregnant, he picked her up and choked her against the wall. Franklin stated the amount of abuse varied and would increase due to Brewster's drinking, financial situation, or jealousy. She would have bruises following the physical abuse on her thigh and back of her neck, places where people could not see. She further testified regarding mental abuse, including that Brewster would say he would take her life if she left or put her out of the house if she told anybody, including the police. Further, Brewster carried a pocket knife and had threatened her with a knife countless times. She sought help while pregnant, but she said there was not much they could do for her. She did not seek the help of law enforcement because Brewster had told her he would put her out if she called the police, and she had nowhere to go. Franklin further stated that Brewster was very angry, very demeaning toward her and the children when he was drunk. He had previously threatened her with a knife after he had consumed alcohol, placing it to her throat, saying, "I'll take your life if you ever leave me." She stated that she packed up a few times to return to California, but each time Brewster or his mother convinced her to stay. Franklin testified that Brewster's actions on the morning of the incident were pretty much normal except for him trying to punch her in the face. Franklin further stated that on one occasion she went to the emergency room of the Lehigh Valley Hospital to seek medical treatment for the abuse. Although she told the hospital personnel that she fell down the stairs, she actually went because Brewster had made her fall into the wall after they had an argument because Brewster wanted to take the kids out with him while he was drinking. She went to the hospital because she was pregnant at the time and concerned about the baby. She also visited a doctor after Brewster kicked her in the ankle. Franklin testified that she had told her trial counsel about the abuse, both physical and mental. She informed him that alcohol made Brewster more aggressive and that she was afraid of Brewster. She stated that at the time of the stabbing, Franklin was afraid Brewster was going to take the baby and was afraid of her life. Now, what's interesting is that the niece of Franklin testified and began living with Franklin and Brewster 1.5 to 2 months before August 11th, 2012. She said Brewster drank often and would talk of a lot of mess when intoxicated. He was mean and did a lot of name calling, including calling Franklin bitch and whore. She stated she can't really say whether there was physical abuse, but stated Franklin would be very strange after certain encounters. As an example, she stated they would often sneak to go out to eat or to the mall because Brewster wouldn't like it. She stated that if he found out, it probably would have started an argument, as Brewster and Franklin often argued. Another of the kids provided testimony about the events of August 11th. This child was in the room during the incident. She stated that when Brewster, Nakia, and Monique left for the club, Brewster took a bottle of liquor with him. Brewster, Nakia, and Monique were drunk when they returned home. She was on the couch when they returned but went to her bedroom. Shortly after, she stated she could not hear everything Franklin and Brewster said, but heard a boom, boom, boom. She also heard Franklin say that she was going to let him hit her, and heard Brewster calling Franklin a whore. She left the bedroom when she heard Franklin ask for a knife, and she said she would not let Brewster leave with the baby. Brewster was upset and cursing and yelling. He was like trying to get an excuse to leave. He had a child in one arm and she believed he had his keys in the other. He was yelling and saying, "I spent all this money and you can't go with me to get no food," and like just being belligerent. She also said this was not the first time he acted in an aggressive manner, stating, "We could hear stuff from our room, but I can't say that I actually would see, but we could hear them and it wasn't, good. It didn't sound good. She further said that after Franklin poked Brewster the first time, he snatched her by her left arm and then she did it again. Nakia took Brewster into the hallway. Now, Franklin's son also testified and he said that his father's demeanor would change when he would drink. The son never saw Brewster strike Franklin, but did see him yell at her and call her names, including bitch and whore. He further stated that Brewster would hit him with a belt if Brewster thought he was lying. The son testified regarding the events of August 11th. He said that Brewster was drunk when he returned home. He was wobbling and not walking straight. Brewster told his son to get out of Franklin's bedroom and then Brewster locked the door. He heard something that sounded like things being knocked over, thrown around, and heard Franklin and Brewster arguing. He heard Franklin ask him to get a knife and he got one from the kitchen and left it on the table. He said he saw Brewster holding a child. Brewster wanted to take the child outside, which Franklin did not want. Franklin told Brewster he could not take the baby and that she would insert the knife in him. Brewster taunted Franklin and told her to do it. Brewster grabbed Franklin's left arm, but the son was unsure whether he grabbed her before or after she put the knife in him. The son recalled talking to an attorney and at some point, but did not know whether the attorney represented Franklin. He was never contacted to appear in court and did not know when the trial occurred. He said that Brewster had a pocket knife. Brewster had never taken it out when he was mad, but did show it to him a couple of times. Most of the kids weren't sure when the trial was, but eventually when they testified, that's when they realized the trial is taking place. I can only assume the elders in the family didn't want them to be any part of it. The trial counsel also testified. They stated that Franklin informed him that Brewster would argue, yell and scream when he consumed alcohol, but said that she did not talk about physical abuse. He stated he had his investigator look into abuse but found no protection from abuse orders or police reports, and the neighbors did not know of any abuse. He said that there was no evidence other than what Franklin told me about Brewster and his anger and temper when he consumed alcohol. So, on July the 16th, 2013, Nicole was sentenced to life in prison. So if we take the entire incident for what it is, a man is drunk, he gets into an argument with his wife-to-be, they get into a scuffle, she then inserts a knife into him, his life is gone. This to me is not isolated. This wasn't just a random occurrence. This is something that had been building up. I take what she says about his abuse at face value, but it does not justify what she did. However, the question remains, should she be spending life in prison? Comment, tell me what you think.
Literally just hours before she's set to walk down the aisle in a designer wedding dress, the bride not posing, surrounded by her bridesmaids for the wedding photos. She's posing with the jailhouse sheriff in a mugshot after she allegedly stabs her groom to death practically en route to the wedding. We are taking your calls first straight out to Allentown. Joining us, Bob Howard with WAEB. Bob, what happened?
Well, sometime around 2 a.m., Nancy, Saturday morning, about 8 hours before they were set to walk down the aisle, Nicola Franklin and her would-be husband, Billy Brewster, got into some form of an argument inside the apartment they shared in Whitehall Township, just outside of Allentown. Things got very heated. At one point, Mr. Brewster said he was going to go out and get something to eat. The next thing we know, someone yelled knife, and Mr. Brewster was stabbed several times in the heart, twice.
Everyone, we are taking your calls to Matt Zarrell, also joining us on the story. It was literally hours before they're set to walk down the aisle. The pastor had already been in the home visiting them just before the wedding. Family had arrived. In fact, he was going to get some food for the family before they left for the wedding itself. What do we know? Why on earth would the bride stab the groom in the heart?
Nancy, we're still trying to learn more exactly about motive. We spoke to police a number of times. They're also trying to figure it out. But, Nancy, you're right. There was multiple family members in the house, including 4 children who reportedly witnessed this incident. Now, we're still trying to figure out how it was broken up. Apparently, the cousin interrupted them as the wife was allegedly stabbing her soon-to-be husband.
Isn't it true that we know of 2 stab wounds? There may be more. She is still insisting, quote, I didn't mean to kill him. Was she just before a judge?
Yes, Nancy. She actually had her arraignment just a few hours ago. She actually cried, rocked herself back and forth, and she was able, interrupting by sobs, choking out, "I did not kill him on purpose." Now, when the judge announced that the soon-to-be groom was pronounced dead, Franklin actually told the judge, "You got to check again." She was unable to comprehend that her fiancé was dead. The judge responded by saying he was pronounced dead by the Lehigh County coroner. The bride proceeded to wail, cover her face in her hands, saying, "I want my family back," saying, "I want to go home, I want to go home." And the judge said, "You're not going home anytime in the near future."